Hello! How you doing? The only thing human beings understand less than what light is, that would be the term energy. I have a link below in the description, also to a pinned comment for the 5-page download on the definitions below. I'd like to go over some of the high points. I had a lot of people actually thank me to tell them about the coronal mass ejection. People sent me pictures from Kansas, Alabama, Texas, even Tallahassee, Florida, showing me the purple and fantastically colored aurora. I'm glad there wasn't any super major plasma hitting the ionosphere of the Earth that would have caused capacitance overload on some parts of the grid. There were a couple reports of grids being down. I don't know if those were related, however, but fascinating. Apparently that's ending this evening. I wanted to find energy and emission, and of course an emission actually is what people wrongly and upside down see to be as energy. Also to medium and a ground and a particle. By the way, if you ever like these articles, and this will be added to my definitions list, which is also too in the description below. Any donation is always warmly welcome. Send me an email. Also, I have to go over these and hit the strong points, and I read every comment, so let me know. I'm going to have a live stream tonight. And by the way, I do live streams 3 times a week on Wednesday night, Friday, and Sunday night. That's 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I usually show up about 10 minutes early. Getting on to energy, of course it's wrongly said that energy is the ability to do work, if you look up the definition of energy. However, that's purely descriptive. That's not explicative of what actually energy is. Of course, a short energy explanation would be non-Cartesian pure potential, i.e. of the ether. Rest potential, which of course is as yet unmanifest. Denotative energy, of course, has no measurable value. It's incomposite and has no mass nor magnitude. Nothing is not to be confused with not a thing. People are like, well, what is it if I can't see it and measure it? I mean, it's like, why don't you measure your feelings for your children or your mother, for example? It's completely senseless that people will point out things that have no locus and deny it when they don't exist, when they take a million things for granted that have no locus and which you can't point to, and they know that those do exist. Of course, exist is certainly so the wrong word. Exist literally means phenomenal. We're talking about something that is aphenomenal, specifically metaphysical. To ask things about the parameters of which being phenomenal that is not phenomenal, of course, is completely ridiculous and absurd and unintelligent. What is above, or rather under, specifically physics, is of course metaphysics. What metaphysics is, ultimately, is incoordinate or non-Cartesian energy. And of course, its countless roles in the substrate of being, fields, and the source for all manifest forces and phenomena is what we're referring to as energy. Now, this is what everybody thinks is energy. When people think of energy, they think of like a fire burning or a mushroom cloud of fissionable plutonium or uranium. Wow, there's energy, look at that. Or the heat coming out of the furnace, countless things. Of course, these are not energy at all. These are the inverse of energy. Of course, energy is never emitted. Rather, it's a perturbation of a medium regarding what people consider to be energy. Of course, sound's not an emission either. Even Nikola Tesla mentioned this. Light is not an emission. Neither is magnetism. Sure, everybody knows magnets emitting magnetism. Well, that's not the case. Nothing emits either sound nor light. The assumed, and wrongly so, speed is the rate of induction of the medium as against the self, i.e. the hysteresis of the medium as against the self, or the rate at which the medium can be disturbed, or in this case, perturbation thereof. Nothing can be said of light without knowing that light is not an emission. It's not a wave. Of course, a wave is not a thing at all, rather what something does. Epiphenomena specifically. A particle, certainly not a duality, of which there are no dualities in nature. Ergo, to wit, the notion of a speed of light is anti-intellectual nonsense of the highest magnitude. A wave in and of a medium, of course, is not an emission, rather a disturbance of the frequency. Said frequency is always translatable to the capacitance of the same disturbance. All energy emissions, which every human being wrongly considers to be energy, are curvilinear and centrifugal force manifestations, or fields as, of course, what is meant. Force is what all humanity wrongly calls and ideates as energy. These, of course, are energy discharges correctly understood, such as magnetism, electricity, so on and so forth. All matter, either in simplex, referring to hydrogen, or in complex, that would be all atoms other than hydrogen, are capacitance threshold light, of course, as meant spherical frequency light. All black holes, for example, likewise, are matter conglomerate threshold. Light ends at, this is the important part, light ends at capacitance threshold. Likewise, all matter ends at capacitance threshold, against magnetism's threshold to keep said supermass in the universe, whose main attributes, of course, are magnitudes of masses. This formation that we call a black hole, of course, it's not a hole. Call it black because it has no palpable, demonstrable presence as a conventional phenomena in the universe, and that's why it confuses humanity so much. En frequency capacitance terminates light into, or rather as, matter. Very simple, isn't it? The end of frequency capacitance, i.e. the maximum capacitance of light, terminates as hydrogen. The end of magnetism's threshold to keep a mass as having magnitude in the visible universe terminates matter into, or rather as, that thing we call a black hole, this phenomena, or specifically a counterspatial sync mass. It's very simple. Isn't that neat? When you reach maximum capacitance of light, you have matter. When you actually reach maximum capacitance of magnetism's ability to keep a foothold in the visible universe of magnitudes, you have this neat little thing called black hole. Now that is the center holding. That is perfect simplicity. It couldn't get any more simple than that. And these are not big words. I always find it funny, people, you're using big words. I'm not using big words. Maybe instead of me using big words, which I'm not, these are definitely not big words, maybe your vocabulary is a little, needs to be expanded a little bit. Getting onto a ground. Any and all grounds, of course, are counterspatial sinks, an acceleration towards a force null. Gravity, of course, is an ether rarefication. Tension, discharge, a mutual acceleration towards a torsion null locus. Quite literally, also, too, we could refer to it as an anti-field. Magnetism's ground, of course, is at the center of the torus. Of course, there's nothing in the middle of the torus of the donut. This is the dielectric null or counterspace, i.e. ether rest locus. Yeah? But it still has no Cartesian point. Now, referencing relative to the torus, it does have a point, but it has no point specifically in and of itself. There is no point. But relative to the torus, we could certainly locate it. All force vectors, of course, are curvilinear, such that all field modalities curved towards a ground. And by a ground, we just mean an ether null or a rest locus. Any and all grounds are vectors towards non-Cartesian rest, i.e. maximum ether potentiality. Gravity and magnetism, of course, are both point source fields or anti-fields in the case of so-called gravity. So these are point source field modalities. All grounds, of course, are force sinks or field modality terminators. All fields curve towards rest, and all rest vectors are force sink null points. It is of great note, of course, that space is not a ground or a terminator of any field or a force, such that space is literally the inverse of counterspace itself. Logically and necessitatively so, nothing grounds or ever terminates in space. Space has never been witness to the termination or a terminal node of any energy, any force, any field. It can't, because space, as Nikola Tesla famously said, has no properties, which is accurate. Getting on to a medium. Of course, a medium is a nexus of pure potential, i.e. energy or the ether is meant. By the way, energy, medium, and ether, these three terms, are all interchangeable. Energy, medium, and ether, equally interchangeable. All non-conglomerate masses and force vectors and or movements, which are falsely called energy, of course, require a medium. The medium of all fields is the ether. All fields, of course, are vector modulations of same medium, the ether. Non-compounded, immaterial, and massless. The ether is the universal medium of all energy manifestations and, of course, said phenomena thereof. The all-pervasive medium of all potential is, of course, necessitatively the ether. It can't be anything else. Ideations in the past by countless people throughout all of history, these ruminations that the medium, i.e. the ether, is gaseous or compound or substantial, meaning made of something. Like, what's the ether made of? Well, if it was made of something, it wouldn't be the ether by definition. This is anti-intellectual and, of course, logically a dead end. So Tesla quote, light is a sound wave in the ether. There's another Tesla quote, light cannot be anything else but a longitudinal disturbance in the ether involving alternating rarefactions and compressions. The compressions of what light is where these atomists, the stooges of academia, came up with the idea of the photon. Yeah, it's kind of like you ever dropped a rock in the water. You watch it at slow, super high-speed recording, watch it in slow-mo on playback. You'll see the little waves ripple out in the water as the rock is dropped, and then there'll be this pinch point where the little drop will form up out of the water. That little drop of the medium, in this case, we're dropping a rock in the water, you get the exact same phenomena of an energy release of the ether, where the modality, i.e. the medium, is creating this rarefaction, a compression, be a little drop of the ether, a little energy compression. And that's where they actually came up with the idea of the photon. These people just like hammer everything's a nail to an atomist, everything's a particle. This is, of course, where they have intellectually failed at absolutely every vector. They don't understand anything. It's because they're atomists. Getting onto a particle, of course, an atom is an ether condensate phenomenon. It's the spherical frequency of UHE, or ultra-high energy. Atoms, of course, are like ice nodules floating in the eternity of the ether, sea or medium analogy. All matter, of course, are transient phenomena, either compounded or uncompounded in the case of hydrogen, in the sea of inertia, or the ether by definition. Pure potentiality, i.e. the ether, has no Cartesian reality or footprint, only fields and epiphenomena do. Actuality, i.e. matter and atoms thereof, is the negative image, of course, of inertia or potential, and has magnetism solely to blame for its existence in the temporal universe of phenomena. For the sake of logic, phenomena and magnetism, of course, are one and the same thing. Phenomena owes 100% of its existence and nature to and due to magnetism. Slowly. All particles in simplex are capacitance threshold light, as I've already said. All atoms other than hydrogen are just compounded hydrogen. Also, all so-called neutrons are just phase modalities of protons, since all free neutrons, every branch of science agrees to this fact, spontaneously become protons. So something spontaneously becomes its supposed opposite. Well, opposite of a proton is a neutron. If a free neutron spontaneously becomes a proton, then that thing that we called a neutron was just a phase modality of a proton. It's like, well, it's like if you leave ice out in the sun, it will spontaneously become water. It's like, well, instead of calling it ice, let's just call it cold water. But we don't do that. We got a short little word for cold water. We call it ice. But the exact same logic applies here. You know, Mother Nature doesn't do complexity, and the center must hold. Nothing when beginning in time can escape ultimate obvious oblivion or destruction. As human beings, of course, are swimming in the sea of ignorance and believe that the unreal, i.e. matter and atoms, to be the real, and only the real, i.e. ether or inertia, to be the unreal. Humanity, of course, always sees everything upside down and backwards. The field, of course, is an ether perturbation modality. An atom, likewise, just and simple at maximum capacity is threshold. A hydrogen atom and a black hole are 100% exactly the very same thing. Walter Russell essentially said this also. I have the quote if you're looking for it. They are only differentiated by sake of their masses. All atoms are little baby black holes. I don't like the term black hole. It has too much connotation with it, strange connotation, kind of like the word ghost. So you believe in ghosts? I always laugh when someone says that. Belief is the plaything of children. When we say ghost, let's just use what it logically is, which is just a disembodied being. That's just like talking about a signal that hasn't been tuned by a radio. We all believe in the broadcast that comes out of the radio. But ignorant people will think, well, without the radio, do you believe in signals? Like, that's so stupid. What do you mean, do you believe in signals? I mean, a radio doesn't generate a signal. It tunes it, and it broadcasts it after it processes it. But to think that there's no signal without a radio is, the Titanic of stupidity. It's completely ridiculous, I could go on about particles, but I'll let you read the article below. Let's go on to fields. Of course, the field is an ether perturbation modality, like I've said countless times, but ultimately there's only one field, that being the ether itself, the genesis matrix of all fields, but the ether in stasis has no Cartesian presence or reality, which is the only manner by which empirical beings deem anything to be. As such, we might declare the dielectric to be the one fundamental field, which is the ether under stress or torsion, and the conjugate of the dielectric, i.e. the dielectric field, which is magnetism, which itself is the loss of that energy. I don't want to go on too much into fields. I've gone over fields kind of endlessly. I'd like to go on to the so-called gravity field, and then make some conclusions and statements. And simplex math determines the center of gravity, of course, logically to be two objects. There's no question by anybody on this earth that the center is quite literally nothing, a mere coordinate towards which objects are accelerating. Certainly likewise an undeniability. These objects are not accelerating towards one another, rather towards this grand nothing, a center, which is nothing, literally a mere erasure of the presence of the rarefaction, and it means a dissipation of the dielectric torsion or ether torsion. It's no different than when everybody identifies as an electrostatic cling between two socks, for example, removed from a hot dryer. You know, why do they accelerate towards one another? You know, the ideation, the so-called magnetic attraction, which is not magnetism, and the so-called gravity, and so-called electrostatic cling, are different things. It's completely ridiculous. They're only differentiated by whether one is point source and whether one is non-point source, in the case of mutual mass acceleration and the formation of what we call gravity conventionally. The fulcrum, of course, of these masses is both mere coordinate relative to the masses and 100% undeniably not a thing at all, and nobody with any mind would argue that masses are being controlled by either coordinates and or nothing. This idea of warped space-time is the one and only time Nikola Tesla foams at the mouth, almost literally, in his vehement, vociferous rejection of that absurdity. It's like saying a shadow acts upon things, and an ignorant person would think that, well, when I stand in a shadow, you know, I feel cooler than when I'm standing in the sun. Like, well, that is true. But that's because there's an absence of something. A shadow is not a thing. A space is no different than a shadow. A shadow, of course, is the after effect, space, is the after effect of a centrifugal divergent magnetic field, the volume of the torus, but that doesn't give reification to space or space curvature. Space doesn't curve, it's the underlying ether torsion thereof, and the impetus behind which and due to which masses mutually accelerate, but never towards one another. It's like, well, correct observation shows that they are accelerating towards one another. Correct observation, yet incorrect conclusions. Are actually accelerating towards a, called a barycenter. Academia calls it a barycenter. It's like, what is that barycenter? Well, that's the lowest pressure node between both, at which the two masses would eliminate out the torsion, the ether torsion thereof. It's no different than stretching a rubber band out. If you had two masses on either end, you have this torsion of the actual rubber band, not of space. Space has no properties, rather of the ether. These masses are not accelerating. If you had two balls on the either end of a rubber band and you let them go, you know, you would observe, if the rubber band were invisible, you would observe that these masses are accelerating towards one another, but what is really happening is the dissipation of the torsion or the negative elasticity of the medium. That, of course, is the ether. It's kind of like if little children have done this, you've seen them do it in the water. They'll actually try to part the water as they're standing in or sitting in the water. They'll try to divide it. And it's like, oh, it doesn't matter. When you divide it, the water flushes right back in again. Yeah? You ever seen a little kid do that? You push the water apart and whoop, the water immediately rushes right back in again? Well, water, of course, is a medium, and the ether is also a medium. So there's no such thing as a gravity field. Rather, gravity itself, of course, is an anti-field, a ball thrown up in the air, whereupon falling back to Earth, of course, is certainly so not an anti-throw. Neither is gravity a type of field. The phenomena observed relative to gravity is not nor ever is in question. The phenomena observed, rather its definition and the basis behind its mechanics, how it works and why it works. And of course human beings are clueless on this front. Human beings don't get that at all. Ideations of spatial curvature as per relativity have been proven both impossible, irrational, irrational and derided by the likes of Tesla, Dr. Oleg Djefamenko, and countless others. A gravity field, of course, does not exist at all, nor is gravity a force. Anytime somebody says the force of gravity, they've destroyed themselves. Gravity is the total opposite of a force. And this phenomena that human beings call gravity, of course. And I love it when some of the flurfers and some other strangeness, people say, oh, gravity doesn't exist. It's like, what? I don't care what word you use. You know, when you jump off of a ladder, for example, and you accelerate towards the earth and you maybe accidentally break your leg, what is that phenomena called? See, gravity doesn't exist. Okay, I don't care what you call it, gravity. You know, I don't care. Let's talk about what that phenomena is when you drop an apple or, you know, you jump off a ladder. What's that phenomena? Never an answer. For it is like a two-word answer without any explicatives behind it to give reification for those two words, which is, you know, it's better to say you don't know. It's like, I really want to know, but I don't know. That's the wise answer, rather than postulating some regurgitated nonsense that academia has told us to believe in. Here's a quote from Sir Isaac Newton, by the way, and the laws of Sir Isaac Newton, I'll eventually post those, are full of errors. Force equals mass times acceleration. I mean, that equation's been used for decades now. Of course, it's accurate. But the descriptors used in Einstein's laws are extremely incorrect. This is Sir Isaac Newton. It's inconceivable that inanimate matter should, without the mediation of something else, he's referring to the ether, i.e. the medium, which is not material, operate upon and affect other matter without mutual contact, or material contact is meant. Gravity should be innate, inherent, and essential to matter. Well, this is where he's wrong. Gravity is not innate to matter at all, rather to the tension or torsion of the medium within which they sit, kind of like our ice floating in the ocean analogy. So that one body may act upon another at a distance through a vacuum. This is instantaneous action at a distance. This is the reason why all of relativity and all of quantum poppycock and nonsense fails, because they called it spooky. Ooh, that's spooky. And these people have denied the ether. Not my opinion, it's their position. They think everything is mediated by particles, and when they observe instantaneous action at a distance, they call it spooky, because it has nothing to do with so-called warped space-time, and you can't have instantaneous action at a distance in an atomistic view of the universe, but the universe isn't governed by atomism, it's governed by the ether. Through a vacuum without mediation, else by and through their actions, and of course may be conveyed from one another, to me is so great an absurdity that I believe no man who has in philosophical matters a competent faculty of thinking can ever fall for it. Gravity must be caused by an agent acting constantly according to certain laws. But whether this agent be material or immaterial, I have left that to consideration of my readers. This is where Newton is famously quoted as saying, hypothesis no fingo, which meaning regarding gravity, he says, I posit no hypothesis, which is a fancy way of saying, I have no idea what gravity is, which is a brilliant answer. It's noble and wise to say, I don't know, I really want to know, but I don't know, rather than regurgitating the nonsense and absurdity of atomistic-based relativity and quantum. By the way, the fat, bald, tattooed monkey that you're watching in this video, I know the entire origins, use, and misuse of the term quantum. There is nothing in nature that is quantum. It's a reference to a measure, das Lichtquant, the smallest unit of energy measurement, which they ideate as the photon, which of course is their religion, which is atomism. But there's no such thing as a mile, a meter, a second, a gram, an ounce, a pound. These are measures that are agreed upon by humanity. Das Lichtquant. When you say quantum phenomena, you're saying a measured phenomena. It doesn't refer to anything in nature. The gods of field theory, Tesla, Faraday, Steinmetz, Heaviside, James Clerk Maxwell, J.J. Thomson, none of these people ever use that word because it has nothing to do with nature. There's nothing in nature. What did Walter Russell say about quantum? The greatest absurdity of all time or something is quantum, which is true. It's not a reference to anything in nature. It is a statement of an agreed upon unit of measurement, or das Lichtwort. A measure is not a thing. You know, a gram of what? A mile of what? A pound of what? A quantum of what? It's a reference to a measure. And a measure is not a thing in nature. Measures were created by men. Grams, pounds, ounces, kilograms, feet, inches, millimeters, on and on and on. None of those things are things in nature. I went over the highlights and skimmed the highlights in this video. The article and link below to the 5-page article defining energy, emissions, medium, ground, and particles, and so-called gravity is below. I hope you liked this video. I hope it wasn't too dry. Try to keep this 5-page article as simple as possible. But if you think it's too complicated, not my opinion, you're wrong. You just need to expand your vocabulary just a little bit. You know, I am not using, I could use big words, but I ain't using any big words. Yeah, I know ain't's not a word. I ain't using any big words in this article. Instead of accusing me of using big words, maybe the finger should be pointed this way. It's like, maybe I should expand my vocabulary just a little bit. I hope you liked this video, and I hope you liked the article that I wrote for you. Use it wherever you want, however you want. I only copyrighted it for sake of purpose to say that I wrote it, but you can certainly use it and post it anywhere you want. Any donation is always warmly welcome. That's also, too, in the link in the description below. I hope you have a lovely rest of this weekend. Simplicity is divinity. Lux a veritas. Peace out, Girl Scout. I'm going to go in the other room and feed my ducks. Quack, 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 quack. Quack, 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 quack.